So ladies and gents, it's now 10:30, so it's the perfect time to start this morning's webinar. And this morning's webinar is entitled, Do you really want to work until your state retirement age? And that's a question that I want you all to think about whilst I'm going through the next couple of slides. Now, today's webinar has been hosted by AVC Wise, and I'm the main speaker today. So my name's Greg March, and I'm a senior retirement educational specialist for AVC Wise. And I've got the pleasure of taking you for the next 25 minutes or so, explaining the benefits of actually thinking and planning for ultimately what is your retirement. Now, just before we start the webinar itself, please be aware that the content from today's presentation is being provided purely for educational purposes only. So please don't take anything that I say as regulated financial advice. And also, when I put today's webinar together, I've based it on the current tax model. So taxation does change on a regular basis. So what we discussed today is based on the tax model today, and this could change again in the future. And when we discuss fund and fund performance, then please be aware that funds do rise, but they also fall as well. And past performance should not be seen as a guide to any future possible performance. So what are we going to cover in the next 25 minutes or so? Well, the first thing we'll do is give an understanding of how the new state pension works. And I will explain how the state pension builds up, when you can expect to receive it, and also how much you can expect to receive as well. And there's one thing you need to be aware of, is that when we're talking about the state pension and the changes to the state pension, please be aware that the local government pension scheme aligns its retirement age with your state pension age. So when we're looking at the state pension age, ask yourself that question: are you going to be happy working till whatever date it may be before you decide to retire? Or, which I think for the majority of us, would you like to become proactive, put more plans in place, and then you decide to retire when you want to? And that's going to be the key from today. And I'll explain how you can help yourself by creating a strategy that will allow you to retire before the state pension age. But to do that, as I've mentioned, you have to be proactive. And then I'll explain what the next steps are, so how you can benefit from being proactive going forward. So as I mentioned, all of this, we're going to run for the next 25 minutes or so. Any questions, type those questions out, keep them to a generic basis, and I'll answer those questions for you at the end of the webinar. If you do have specific personal questions, though, keep those back. And when we finish the session today, I'll actually talk to you about how you can have those personal questions answered for you via a one-to-one call. So the first part of the presentation today is actually looking at the state pension and understand how the state pension actually works. Now, the government changes the state pension on a regular basis. So prior to 2016, the government had what is known as the old state pension. So for any state pension built up prior to 2016, you're building that up in what we call the old state pension. But the old state pension was actually quite confusing, because you had the rules that relate to the old state pension, you had the ability to contract into it, to contract out, and for a lot of people it became really, really confusing. So the government, under what they call pension simplification, introduced what we now know as a new state pension, and that was from 2016 going forward. And this is the pension that you need to understand. So we need to understand how the new state pension works. Now, for you to benefit from the new state pension, what the government actually states is that when you get to your state retirement age, for you to get anything from the new state pension, you must have built up at least 10 qualifying years. So you need to have built up at least 10 qualifying years in the new state pension to get any form of state pension at all. So the question you might be posing then is, well, Greg, what is a qualifying year? And this is important that you take this on board, because later on I want to be talking to you about the salary sacrifice share cost ABC, which is a vehicle that allows you to potentially retire early. But part of the benefit of the ABC is you actually reduce the amount of national insurance that you pay. And a lot of people get confused, because they think, well, if I reduce my national insurance contributions, then surely I'm not building up sufficient state pension benefits. But let me explain what you need to be aware of when it comes to how much national insurance you need to pay to build up a qualifying year. The government has something known as the lower earnings limit, and that's currently set at £6,396. Now, as long as you have income above that level of £6,396, you've built up a qualifying year. So let's say, for argument's sake, I've got income of £7,000 and you've got income of £57,000. We both receive a qualifying year. So what that simply means is that the build up towards the state pension will be exactly the same. So it doesn't actually matter how much national insurance that you pay, the build up to the qualifying year, as long as you've got income above 6,396, will give you the equivalent of one qualifying year. It's the same for somebody that earns £7,000, and it's the same for somebody that earns 57, who's paid a lot more national insurance. So going forward, for you to benefit from a qualifying year, all you simply need to have is income above the lower earnings limit, 6,396. A single pound above that means you've got a qualifying year going towards your state pension. So please take that on board if you can. Also, to benefit from what we call the full state pension under the new state pension rules, the government states that after a period of 35 years, where you've got 35 qualifying years, you will then receive the maximum state pension that's going to be payable. So to benefit from the full state pension, you need to have 35 qualifying years under your belt, and then you'll get the full state pension. Now, unfortunately, for those of you that have got more than 35 years, it doesn't mean you get more state pension. So anything over 35 years, the government says, well, then that contribution purely goes to things like the NHS and other aspects. So 35 years is the cutoff to get the maximum state pension. Even if you've got 40 years under your belt, you'll still get the same full state pension as somebody that's got 35 years under the belt. Now, who's eligible for the new state pension? Well, to keep things simple, this is the easiest way for you to understand it. So if you're in the audience today and you're male and you're born after the 6th of April 1951, then you will then be eligible for the new state pension. If you're female and born after the 6th of April 1953, again, you're eligible for the new state pension. If you're born prior to these dates, then your pension build-up will be based upon the old state pension. So, question is, what happens if you look at your records and you realize that, well, listen, I haven't actually got the full 35 years. It could well be that you have contracted out previously for a period of time. It could well be that you've maybe taken a long time off to go and travel. All of those issues could actually reduce the national insurance build-up that you've got. Now, just for some of you in the audience, for those of you that have taken time off to have families, if you've requested to get a child benefit, the child benefit actually pays your national insurance up to the age of 12 for the child. So by having children, that shouldn't impact your national insurance records, but you might want to double check anyway. So if you've got a gap in your national insurance records for whatever reason, and I'll show you how you can check that in just a minute, the government actually allows you to buy back national insurance by going online to the government's website, and you can request to buy back national insurance from the previous 6 years. So you do have the ability to top up your national insurance records if you're not able to build up the sufficient 35 years before you retire. So you have the ability to buy back previous 6 years. And it's actually quite cost effective. So if you are in a situation where you are short of national insurance, I would highly recommend that you look at the government's website to see what the cost is for the voluntary contributions, because ultimately, after a short period of time, whatever that cost is, you get the money back in state pension anyway. Now, the way in which you check to see if you've got a gap is log on to the website you can see on the screen. So it's gov.uk, log into the register of HMRC online services, and then you can check your records. Now, what I would also recommend that every single one of you do at some point is when you go onto the government's website, you will have an account called a gateway account. Now, if you haven't got the gateway account, which you can see on the right hand side here, I would highly recommend that you register for this, because this tells you about all the information the government's got upon you, and also it tells you about your state pension and everything else. So what I would say to you is this: all of you at some point log on to your gateway account and then check how many national insurance years that you've built up. Now, please be aware the government does make mistakes every now and then. I know you find that hard to believe, but they do. So if you check your records and you're thinking, well, why are they showing that I've got a gap in my records when I was working for whatever company it may well be, speak to HMRC via the government gateway account, because sometimes there are errors in place. I had a colleague with a previous company who had a very common name, a Mr. David Smith, and unfortunately all his national insurance contributions were being put to somebody else's account because they had the same date of birth. So check your gateway account just to confirm that you have got the right full 35 years under your belt, and check to make sure there's been no error on your account itself. So once you've understood that you need 35 years of qualifying years to get the full state pension, the question you might be posing then is, well, what is the full state pension, Greg? How much will I receive and when will I receive it? Well, currently, the full state pension equates to £10,600 per year. So when you get to your state retirement age, the government will ultimately pay you a pension of £10,600 per year. Now, a lot of people will say, well, that's not enough for me to survive on. What can I do? The reality is this is just a bit of support you get from the government. It's everything else that you're currently doing that's going to allow you to have the lifestyle that you want when you do decide to retire. So the state pension isn't really designed to give you that lifestyle that allows you to go on holiday 3-4 times a year. The way in which you get that is by understanding other forms of pensions and making sure that you make things like your AVCs a priority going forward to allow you to have a lifestyle that you want. Now, this state pension of 10,600 was increased by what we call the triple lock in April. So the triple lock is a mechanism for the government to increase the state pension. And what they simply do, they look at the rates of the average earnings increases. They look at inflation as measured by CPI, the Consumer Price Index, in September the year before, and then increase it by the higher of. Now, the minimum increase is currently set at 2.5%. So as you're all aware, inflation has been very high in previous years. So in September of last year, inflation was currently sitting at 10.10%, and therefore the government's increased the state pension by that amount. So we've now got a situation where the state pension for this year has increased massively compared to what we would have had as an increase in things like our pay or elsewhere. So the state pension is currently 10,600, and that generically increases every April, and it's increased by what we call the triple lock mechanism whilst it's still in place. Now, one of the things you need to be aware when it comes to the state pension is, again, it's like everything else in life. This is not automatically paid to you. You have to take responsibility and you have to take control to ensure the state pension is paid. So it's taking ownership again of retirement. Now, the government will write you generically 2 months before your state pension age, and they will tell you that you need to request your state pension. So they will write to you and they will tell you you need to request your state pension. Now, if you don't request it, then in some cases the state pension isn't paid, and that becomes a bit of an issue. So take ownership of the state pension, like you should also be taking ownership of your retirement by doing more than what we're just doing currently, and ensuring that you have the right retirement when you finally get there. So the government will write to you and you need to act upon that. However, if HMRC don't have the right details for you, they might write to you, but it could be to a previous address. So you might be sat there waiting for your state pension thinking, why isn't the government paying me my state pension? Pure and simple, they haven't got your right details. So make sure that HMRC do have your correct details. And one of the easiest ways of doing that is go on that gateway account, register for it, and make sure all your details are correct. So to summarize on this section, the state pension is not automatically paid. You yourself have to request the state pension. And we do get lots of questions with people when it comes to the state pension, especially those individuals that decide they wish to work longer than their normal pension age. And one of the questions they get is that should they defer their state pension? And one of the reasons that most people want to defer the state pension, they're saying, well, listen, I'm still working for the council. I've got a salary of, let's say, 45,000. If I draw the state pension, well, that's going to push me to the 40% tax bracket. So I don't want to do that until I decide to fully retire. But the question is, what happens if you defer the state pension? Well, I'll tell you what the government tells you they do. The government says, well, if you do defer the state pension, what we will do is we'll increase your state pension when you come to collect it later on by 5.8% per year. Now, for some people, when they look at this figure here, 5.8% increase per year is quite a seductive figure. And for a lot of people that don't quite understand how the deferment of the state pension works, will take that because they think it's better than having money in a bank or building society, and also it doesn't push them into that 40% tax bracket. But the biggest problem you've got when you come to deferring the state pension is this, is that when you come to collect the state pension later on, the government doesn't make a back pay of those deferred pensions that you've lost. So let's just say, for the sake of maths, the state pension was 10,000, and let's say you defer it for a period of 3 years. You've lost £30,000 over those 3 years. When you come to collect it, all the government's going to do is increase the state pension going forward by 5.8%. And that simply means that for you to get that £30,000 back that you just lost, you need to survive roughly 18 years in retirement to get that money back. So all I would say to you is this, without being able to offer you any form of financial advice, is why would anybody want to defer the state pension? Even if it takes you into the higher rate echelons for tax, just take the pension, enjoy it, and pay a little bit more tax. But remember, if you use your AVC, you can bring that tax right back down. So don't defer the state pension, just put a plan in place. So the question is, when do you get your state pension? And this is where a little bit of confusion comes in. So the state pension is now based purely upon when you were born. So if you were born between the 6th of April 1960 and the 5th of March 1961, your state pension age will be between 66 and 66 and 11 months. So let's say you were born on the 6th of April 1960, your state pension age will be 66. If you were born in May of 1960, your state pension age will be 66 plus 1 month. If you're born in June of 1960, it'll be 66 plus 2 months. And ultimately in March, it'll be 66 and 11 months. Now, if you're born after the 5th of March 1961, but before the 5th of April 1977, then your state pension age currently is 67. So that's where the majority of people will sit who are on this presentation today. But for those of you that were born after 1977, this is where you need to be aware of what's happening to the state pension. So if you're born after the 5th of April 1977, then the current state pension age is 68. However, unfortunately, for this generation, this age group, it is very likely that your state pension age will increase again. It could even happen to this group here as well. What the government's talking about doing is talking about increasing the state pension age as we progress. And there were even discussions that for the really young generation today, the state pension age could be as high as 75. So all I'm going to say to you is this. This is when you get the state pension. This isn't necessarily when you retire, because you can decide to retire when you can afford to retire. And currently, that could be from as young as 55. So unless you want to become really reliant upon what the state pension gives you before you can retire, just put some plans in place. Think of retirement as a really important goal. Don't think of retirement as something you just question maybe 12 months or 24 months before you're getting close to actually going. Think about it today as a really important goal. We spend 25 years paying off a mortgage. Well, why not spend the same amount of time ensuring that we have sufficient funds in place to allow us to retire when we want to and not when the government wants to? So when you look at the state pension, please be aware as well that the current pension that's been offered to you by the local government, that's the Career Average Revalued Earnings Scheme, that pension age is linked, unfortunately, to your state pension age. So the current pension that's been offered to you by the local government, the Career Average Revalued Earnings Scheme, that's the 49th scheme, that's linked to your state pension age as well. So if your state pension age is 67, then the local government is payable to you without any reduction from the age of 67. If your state pension age is 68, let's say 69 or 70, if the government changes it, that means your local government is payable to you without any penalty from the age of 68, 69 and 70 and so on. So please be aware of that when you start planning for retirement. So the question you all need to pose to yourself right now is this. And for some of you, the answer might be yes. But are you happy to work until whatever your state pension age is going to be? Are you happy to work until you're 66, 67 or 68 before you decide to retire? Now, I know some of you will be, but the majority of people, they actually thought of retiring to 67 or 68 and then question how many years they've actually got in retirement to enjoy. That's going to be far too late. So what I'm going to say to you now is this. You can plan to retire early. Now, if you decide to take your local government pension before these pension ages, then remember there will be a reduction, and that reduction will be of roughly 5% per annum for every year that you take it early. So if you take your pension at 65 instead of 67, you can expect to see a 10% reduction on your local government pension scheme. But the reality is, if you take it at 65 rather than 67, you're getting that pension for 2 years longer. And there's no guarantee that we're all going to live until we're 67. So start really thinking about retirement today. But even with those reductions in place, there is something you could be doing right now to really assist yourself when it comes to your plan. And this is where you start taking seriously what this thing called retirement is. We might be spending 140 odd pounds per month on something called Sky TV, but the majority of you aren't going to be putting 140 pounds per month into something called your AVC. So we don't prioritize retirement. And I think now, more so than ever before, if you really are serious about retiring early, you've got to put some plans in place. Now, the most tax efficient method for you to start saving for retirement, to bring that retirement date forward, to benefit from having a retirement and enjoying it when you're able to, is the salary sacrifice share cost AVC. And this is a vehicle that's available to every single one of you in this audience today. And if you look at the share cost AVC as purely as a vehicle that's going to bring that retirement date forward, it also increases your wealth as well, because technically the more that we put into the AVC, hopefully the more we're going to have at our disposal at the point in which we decide to retire. And remember, the earliest age that you could decide to retire or access pensions today is 55. Also, by making a contribution towards your share cost AVC, you're going to be reducing the amount of tax that you pay right now, and also the amount of national insurance that you pay right now. So on one hand, where the government's increasing taxes via stealth mechanisms, be clever, reduce the tax burden by the mechanisms of your AVC, bring that tax bracket down, even come from a 40% taxpayer down to a 20% taxpayer. So if you've taken a pension and you're now a 40% taxpayer, make a contribution to your AVC and drop a tax band. Also, reduce the national insurance you're paying today, because remember, as long as you've got income above 6396, the low earnings limit, it doesn't matter how much national insurance you pay, you'll still get a qualifying year for the state pension. So bring that burden down as well. And remember, the more that you decide to do, the better that you start to invest when it comes to retiring, then the more chance that you've actually got of retiring when you want to retire. So rather than the government dictating that you're going to retire at 67 or 68, or 70 if they increase the retirement ages going forward, you can say, no, I'm looking after myself, I'm planning for myself, I'm going to retire when I want to retire. And also, logically, the more that you put away, the better the retirement lifestyle you're going to have. You're going to be able to be in a situation that you retire and do the things that you want to do, go on those holidays, have a bit of time with the grandchildren, go out for meals without having to count every single penny. And ultimately, that's the reality of planning for retirement. The more you plan, the better it's going to be for yourself. Now, for those of you that aren't aware of what a salary sacrifice share cost AVC is, all it simply is just another vehicle. It's just a separate pot that you've got available to you via the council that allows you to save for retirement. So on one hand, you've got your local government pension scheme that's linked to the state pension age, but on the other hand, you've got your share cost AVC. And you can make contributions into the AVC, whatever contribution that you think is right, anything from £2 to whatever level you're happy with. And for every contribution that you make, the government will actually pay part of your contribution by giving you something that is known as tax relief. So if you're a basic rate taxpayer and you pay tax at 20%, the government will fund 20% of the cost of your AVC contribution. And also, they're going to fund national insurance relief as well. So currently, the basic rate of national insurance is set at a rate of 12%. So when you make a contribution towards your AVC, not only do you get 20% tax relief, you also get 12% national insurance relief as well. Technically, that means the government's funding 32% of the cost of your AVC. And the biggest benefit for yourself is this, is that if you then decide to draw these benefits at the same time as your local government pension scheme, it's potentially possible the whole of the value of that AVC can be given back to you as a tax-free lump sum. So not only do you get the government to fund part of your retirement today, you also get the government to allow you to take it out as a tax-free lump sum. You could, though, use your AVC as a vehicle to allow you to retire early. So you could say, I'm going to get to the stage in which I'm thinking of retiring. Let's just say, for the sake of maths, it's 55, and you don't want to draw your local government pension at 55 because the reductions will be too high. You could actually say, I'm leaving the local government pension on its own, and then I'll access my AVC from the age of 55. If you take this in isolation, then 25% of the value of your pot will be tax-free. And then when you draw the balance, that'll be added to your income and will be taxed accordingly. But it will allow you to retire early without having to damage your local government pension. So it's a really flexible scheme that's been offered to you. And the other thing about your AVC as well, if you're concerned about affordability, you can go into your account on a month-in, month basis, and you can decrease or increase your contribution at any given stage. So if you're thinking, well, I can afford, let's say, £250 per month today, but then tomorrow the boiler blows up, the car needs its MOT, and everything else that goes wrong, you can go back onto your account and drop it to just £2, pay for those external factors, and then increase your contribution again. So affordability should not be an issue when you're looking at your AVC. So it's a perfect vehicle for you to start saving for retirement that allows you to basically bring that retirement date forward before the retirement date in which the government is looking at, which is 66, 67, or 68, or even further. So you plan for retirement and you retire when you decide to retire. So the benefit of putting money into the AVC, apart from the factors we've just discussed, is that tax relief that the government gives you. So if you were to invest £250 a month into your AVC, and remember you can increase and decrease that every single month, because of the savings of tax and national insurance relief from your wallet, from your purse, that £250 per month will only physically cost you the equivalent of £170. So on your application, you put 250, but what you lose from your wallet or your purse on a monthly basis is £170. The reason for that, the remaining £80 is actually paid for by the government. So why wouldn't you want the government to put money into your retirement pot to allow you to retire earlier? And if you're a high rate taxpayer, that'll be even better than that. Now, that actually equates to a growth rate today of just under 47% on every contribution. So when you take that figure of £170, but on your application, remember, you need to put the 250. But when you take £170 from your purse or from your wallet, for that to equate to £250 instantly overnight, you would need to have a growth rate of just under 47%. And the AVC gives you that on every single contribution that you make going forward. Every single contribution. So not only can you then control your retirement date, not only can you bring that retirement date forward, but also you can improve your wealth today and reduce your tax burden today. You could even bring yourself from a 40% taxpayer down to a 20% taxpayer with a little bit of planning. So for me, I think every single one of you should be asking the question, why am I not looking at the share cost AVC? Not only because of the benefits that it has, but also under the principle, I don't want to work until I'm 66, 67, or 68, because if I work until that age, how many years have I really got in retirement? So today, don't procrastinate. Don't put things off. Don't think, well, I'll do this next month, the month after, the month after. You decide today to start taking back control, and you can then decide to retire whenever you want to, not the date that's been enforced on you by the government. So the salary sacrifice share cost AVC, it is a missing jigsaw piece, but you've got access to it now. Make sure you don't lose it. So be proactive and establish your AVC going forward for today. It makes a lot of sense. So you might be asking the question, well, that's fine, Greg, but how do I do my AVC? So to establish an AVC and start bringing that retirement date forward, go onto your ABC Wise account, so abcwise.co.uk, click on your account. If it's not there, just register, but it should be there. And then click on New to AVCs and complete your application. It should take no more than 5 minutes to complete. If you've already got AVCs and you're now thinking it's the time for me to start increasing that contribution, because ultimately this thing called retirement could be a 20 or 30-year holiday, and I want to make sure I've got enough funds in the pot to enjoy, go back onto your account, simply press amend, press your figure, and then press submit. That will then be action from your next available payroll. So you've got complete control on when you want to retire. The only person that's going to stop you retiring when you want to retire, unfortunately, it's you. You have to start taking ownership. Irrespective of affordability, every single pound that you put away will make a difference. So whatever your affordability is, just question it right now. Now, we are aware that some of you might want a little bit of support when it comes to actually planning for retirement. So we do offer the option for a 20-minute call via Teams, where people like myself can sit down and build up some strategy for you, where we say, listen, this is the maximum you can take out as your ABC as a lump sum if you want it as a lump sum. This is the maximum you can put into your ABC based upon what we call the national minimum wage. We can support you with that, but if you do request a one-to-one, what I'd ask you to be is prepared. And the way in which you're prepared is to have a copy of your pension statement at those meetings. And that pension statement should tell you what the pension is going to be at the age in which you're looking to retire. So you need to request that, and also have a copy of your payslip as well. Now, what I would ask is that for these 20-minute team-to-team one-to-one calls, they are very, very, very popular. So please only apply for one if you're looking to establish your ABC now and you need a little bit of support. The majority of people can just go online and establish their ABC themselves. But if you want that extra bit of support, then feel free to request this. Now, if you're not looking to do your ABC for the next year or so, then please just put this off until you're looking to do it, so we can get the people that do need the support right now rather than those that need support in a year's time, if that makes sense. So how do you request a one-to-one? Well, I'll leave this on the screen before I go across another screen to answer any questions, but to get a one-to-one, simply send us an email or go to, sorry, should I say, to abcwise.co.uk/meeting, and you can request your one-to-one via that. And if you've got any general inquiries, then feel free to use the live chat that you'll see on the system, or just pick up the telephone and give us a call. So I'll leave this on the screen. I'm now going to jump to a different section to answer any questions that may have come through. So let me just see if we've got any questions coming through so far, and I'll answer these questions for you. So we've had one question that's come through, and that one question is as follows. I'm just reading the question. Okay, so the question is, if you need 10 years of national insurance for the state pension and you plan to retire before 2026, i.e. less than 10 years, what happens, and can you pay national insurance until you get the 10 years? All right, so the 10-year rule is as follows. When the new state pension was introduced in 2016, from that one particular date, every year that you've worked, as long as you've got income above the lower earnings limit, you'll benefit from a qualifying year for the state pension. So from 2016 to where we are now, 2023, all of us should have roughly 7 years worth of qualifying years. But from the service we had prior to 2016 under the old state pension, the government's also calculated how many years you've had then built up, and that will become what they call a starting figure. So all of the service before 2016 is still counted, and that's known then as a starting figure. So that will be added to the 7 years you built up from 2016. What I would say, Anonymous, if you are confused, the simplest thing for you to do, go onto that gateway account, look at your records, and it will tell you how many years you've built up. And that will take into account the years prior to 2016, where the government creates what they name as a starting calculation, plus the years from 2016 going forward. If you haven't got the sufficient 10 years, which I would be surprised at this stage, then you can buy those years, go back forward 6 years. And again, you can do that from the government's website. So that's the only question that we've had so far. So hopefully the rest of you then totally understand the benefits of planning for retirement. So let me then just summarize this webinar, if I can, for all of you today. Retirement and the retirement date that's been set by the government is only for those people that don't want to plan. So if you don't want to plan, then you'll retire at 66, 67 or 68. But like me, if you're really concerned about having the right retirement and being able to enjoy retirement, you owe it to yourself to put plans in place. And the simplest way to plan is by using the most tax efficient method that you've got that's been offered to you by your council, which is your salary sacrifice share cost ABC. You're going to reduce your tax and national insurance bonus today, and you can increase your wealth for tomorrow and bring that retirement date forward. So why wouldn't you want to do that? So thank you very much for your time and attention today. Hopefully you found today's webinar of use, and no doubt we'll speak again in the future. Enjoy the rest of the day. Take care. Bye-bye.